Hi and welcome back. Today I'm going to be showing you how I paint this semi-abstract mountain landscape using only two colours and just a small selection of synthetic brushes. The colours I'm using are Cotman Paynes Grey and Van Dyke Brown, and the brushes I'm using are from left to right a Cotman synthetic flat brush, 3/4 of an inch size, a size 14 Escoda Ultimo synthetic squirrel, a De La Rowney Aquafine fan brush, but the main workhorse is going to be this 1.5 inch Princeton Aqua Elite Mottler brush, which I'm using instead of my usual hake brush, and I'm trying it out today and we're going to see how it works and how it compares with the hake brush. I've got a sheet of 140 weight Millford cotton watercolour paper taped to my board with ordinary decorators masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 45 degrees, so gravity will help the paint to run and give me some lovely effects. Using my large carpenter's pencil, holding it sort of quite far down rather than up close to the lead so I can get some nice loose marks. I'm just describing the sort of top edge of a range of mountains very, very loosely. It's just a matter of a few little lines and marks to give me a guide. And I've dipped my Mottler brush into some water, and it's not very clean, so you can see it slightly, which is actually quite useful, but it should be clean. And I'm more or less painting my mountain shapes in roughly with water first, then adding a little bit of water spray to soften up the edges of some of my painted watermarks. And now with the Mottler brush I'm going straight into really rich Paynes Grey and Van Dyke Brown mixed together unevenly on my brush. I'm trying to keep a nice sort of hard edge across the top of the mountain. I'm using the tips of the brush to follow the sort of a downward angle, sort of almost, I suppose, a sort of 45-degree angle from the horizon, varying it up here and there, but tending down in that sort of direction to try and get the look of stratification of the mountain. Using my water spray here and there to get some soft edges to get the paint to run, and then putting in a few more fine lines. This brush seems to be really useful. It seems to be very, very versatile. So far, I'm really impressed. This is the Escoda Ultimo brush, and I'm just using this as I would a squirrel mop brush to soften things out. And then going back in with the Mottler brush, keeping on working backwards and forwards, trying to sort of create soft and hard edges, light and dark areas. Just working on texture and tone. I'm being inspired by a few photographs that I found on Pixabay just to give me a sort of rough idea. And now I've turned my board around so that the corner is facing downwards. And you can see now that I can use gravity and my spray bottle just to really get a good directional flow from my marks, following the direction that I'm looking for, which is going to help me to define the strata of my mountain and the sort of rock outcrops and layers. And hopefully with these marks we will suggest the mountain rather than having to sort of paint it in. This is the corner of a cut up store card, which I find really useful to pull through the paint in places, just to give me some finer lines, a bit of directionality again, and to sort of move the paint around a bit. I'm laying my board flat, and now I'm going to continue dropping some richer paint into the wet areas, and it should just blend into the paint that's already there and give me some really interesting variations of tones and shades. The next thing I want to do is put in a little bit of tone into my sky, but not too much. So I'm going to use the negative painting technique and paint around the mountains in a few areas and pull the paint up and then soften it back with a damp brush. So I just get a hint of sky and just this sort of negatively painting the mountain shape with the sky. So here you can see I'm pulling up from that sort of those two lines there. I'm pulling up now the paint using a bit more water, pulling it away from the mountain top into the sky so that that hard edge across the mountain top negatively paints the mountain, leaving that part of the mountain the unpainted paper, which stands out really nicely and helps to add sort of a variety of tone, texture to my painting, and it also gives it sort of more depth. And I just need to work on softening out the sky a little bit, so I'm making that paint, that very pale watery paint, sort of blend out into the white, into nothing, into the white of the paper. And I can continue to tip and tilt my board if I've got too much water pooling up in my page. When I'm painting wet in wet, I sometimes get pools of water, so I have to carefully think about which directions to allow them to run off, because they will of course carry paint with them, as you can see. So I'm still keeping things in the same sort of general direction, which is helping me to keep this kind of abstracted suggestion of the rocks and the way the mountains have sort of grown up over millennia and been weathered and worn. Also trying to sort of get the look of the sort of mountains having sort of like low cloud coming over them. So that's why I'm using so many sort of soft and hard edges to get that sort of misty look as well. I'm using the rounded corner of my plastic store card just to scrape through the very thick paint at the top of this mountain here, and it's just revealing a bit more texture that will soften back as it dries. Some of those marks will disappear, but it just again gives me a bit more variety. When you're just using two colours like this, I think it's quite useful to really work hard on a variety of textures as well as the tones, and of course to make sure you keep enough areas of unpainted paper to keep the painting looking sort of fresh and vibrant. So now just a little bit of tone pulled across the bottom right corner, just allowing the two colours that I'm using to sort of diffuse, and then I can use a tissue to just gently lift out a little bit of light, a little bit of mist here and there as everything softens and diffuses. And my board is now flat so that you can see that in the bottom right, that soft diffusion of colour is bursting upwards and outwards and not running down. And so I'm just making a few final adjustments, and then I'll just let this first layer dry completely and then come back and finish the painting in a little bit once it's dry. So the painting's completely dry, and I've propped it back up at 45 degrees roughly, and I'm going to use a damp brush here. It's the size 14 Escoda Ultimo synthetic mop brush, and I'm using it to go into my dry sky, and the damp water and sort of the gentle scrubbing action is allowing me to soften the sky out a little bit where I had a hard edge where I didn't really want one. So what I'm going to do now is just do a few finishing touches, try and sort of blend out that sky to nothing, so that it gives me more of that sort of misty effect. I can use my 3/4 inch flat brush just to firm up a few sharp edges and darks here and there, because the watercolour has dried back a bit lighter in some places. It always does, so you need to go in once it's dry and put in some nice strong darks. I'm taking my time with this because these finishing touches can sort of make or break a painting, really. And I don't have to rush with this because painting with wet paint onto a dry painting, you can take your time, keep stopping and looking back and assessing how it's looking, what sort of adjustments you need to make without sort of overdoing it or overworking the painting. And the idea here is to try and follow that sort of downward diagonal directionality, but very softly, nearer to the bottom of the painting, softening back, adding slightly darker mixtures to the wash, but keeping it very watery and quite pale, and just balancing tones up with the darks. Obviously, with a painting like this, you can stop at whichever point you want. When you feel that you like the look of it, that's a good place to stop. But I'm just feeling that I just need to just bring this bit more balance across the bottom half towards the right of the painting, but trying not to overdo it. I still want the bottom to be almost as fresh and as light as the sky, but it still needs to sort of have a little bit more texture in it. So now I'm being careful to sort of put a little bit more, slightly firmer marks, but still keeping that similar sort of directionality. So I'm coming to the end of the painting. I'm just going to try and bring a bit more tone across the tape, across the tape at the bottom on the left side, and then to introduce a little bit more of tone into the sky, but without overdoing it. So I'm putting some really watery brown, and then I'll put a little touch of the Paynes grey into that. And again, feather that tone out to virtually nothing with the mop brush. I don't want any hard edges, just need a little bit more tone. That's the Paynes grey going in now. Now I shall take most of it out, but a tiny bit will remain and just give me just the sort of slight difference in tone in the sky that I was looking for. And now I'm just using what little paint there is left on my flat brush to almost sort of stipple in just some tiny delicate bits of tone, just building up where I need it. And lastly, a finishing touch. This is my synthetic fan brush and an inky consistency mixture of the brown and the Paynes grey with my board flat. I'm spattering in across the dry paper and across the damp paper. Where it's dry, I keep my dark spatters. Where it's wet, those dark colours just softly diffuse out and just give me a bit of extra tone. And I think that will do. I shall just leave it to dry now. As soon as it's dry, I shall remove the tape and have a look and see how it looks. When the paint crosses over the tape like this, and sort of it can look a bit ragged around the edges, so it's hard to see it as a finished painting. If you've got a mount or a mat, you can place that over it and see how it looks. Or you can take the tape off and have a look at it, and here we can see that it looks okay. I think my tones are nice. I really like the misty sky, and I'm quite happy with the sort of the way the strata looks. But I think I'm going to be a bit fussy here, and I'm just going to with a clean damp brush, brush into the very top of this focal point mountain area, and then with a tissue dab it out. And just that little highlight there, I think, breaks up that very dark area and just sort of softens that area out and improves it. Well, I think that was really interesting, using those 4 synthetic brushes to do this painting and just a limited palette of Paynes grey and Van Dyke brown. I've always used a 3/4 inch synthetic flat brush and occasionally a synthetic fan brush, but I'm really getting to love my synthetic mop brush, and this Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch Mottler flat brush. It was really easy to use. It's given me some wonderful marks. I really enjoyed painting with it, and I think with a bit of practice it could do just about everything that a hake brush does. So that for those that are looking just to use synthetic brushes, I think it makes a really good alternative. Well, let me know what you think in the comments. I'll be interested to hear what you think, and if you have any synthetic brushes that you use and recommend. And thank you so much for watching. Please leave us a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And thank you so much to my wonderful Patreon group who support this channel. And I'll see you again soon, and happy painting. Bye.